Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another day inside the Lock Shop. Nielsen and Huss with you once again, as always, presented to you by our wonderful partners at Coolbet, where you can literally bet on anything. Go to coolbet.com, and if you're not yet signed up for an account, use the code LOCKSHOP when you do, and you get a 100% deposit bonus on initial deposit up to $200. Huss, what's up, buddy?
Well, what's up? I'm ready for the CFL picks. It has somehow turned into my favorite lock shop of the week over the last little while. And I got to figure out what we need to get out for our lock shop pick of the day. Took an L yesterday on chicken strips. Had a nice start. Got roughed up a bit. Should have been on the bats last night for the Jays. I think we can all agree on that. That was a football.
That was wild. That was nuts. And a lot of the damage being done by the bottom end of the lineup, which was
Danny Jansen
nice to see.
And then, of course, Aaron Judge last night was 60. Did you see that? Did you see that scrum for the 60th ball? There must have been
a little crazy. Well, and those guys that got it just gave it back to him in exchange for like a few autographs. I mean, good on them. Like it's so genuine. Like, but at the same time, you're like, that ball is worth like tens of thousands of dollars. But they got to meet Aaron Judge. I mean, I guess they're just fans. I was a little surprised that it got back so easy after the fight for it.
Listen, I'm not hiring those guys to do any negotiating for me. I'll tell you that. Like they could have maybe squeezed in some season tickets for a few years too, or something like. I don't know, but hey, anyways, they got it in there. I have a feeling there's going to be a 61, a 62, a 63. Yeah. I mean, we'll see how high he can get right now. I'm sure that will be a prop on Coolbet we'll be able to touch on very soon as to where Judge ends up now after this monster season. Although, now, forgive me, maybe this is the Yankee hater in me, but does it really count playing in that glorified Little League stadium in the Bronx right now? I mean, how many of those would be home runs in legitimate major league parks?
In real parks, yeah. That short deck at Yankee Stadium kind of changes the story a little bit, maybe. But he is having a phenomenal season. He's got like 16, 17, 18 more home runs than anybody else. It's ridiculous what he's done this year. It's going to be a shame when we finally find out what he's been taking this season.
Well, and speaking of it being a shame, I mean, the story of the game obviously was 60, but it finished with a walk-off grand slam by Giancarlo Stanton, who I believe had 59 one year before, and he hits this walk-off grand slam. They bring him in for the interview, and they basically just ask him about Aaron Judge for about 3/4 of the interview. I mean, the guy just walked off. We're not done yet, but hey, listen, things are pretty good in Yankee land. They are a wagon, and although they haven't played particularly great over the last 6 to 8 weeks compared to their start, they're going to be a major problem in come playoff time.
All right, coming up, we will have some golf picks. Huss has some President Cup stuff that we're going to get to a little bit later on, but let's get into it. As you have said multiple times, especially recently, Huss, you are seeing the CFL board very well, and hopefully it continues this week, buddy, because I'm hopping on a few games with you.
Yes, well, I mean, as I said, it was 2-1 last week, narrowly missed. There was certainly a path to covering with Calgary in that game.
Yeah.
But from a CFL fan, Bomber fan perspective, it was just awesome that BC got that win. Sets up the game of the week, the rematch. But BC already has the tiebreaker, Dusty, and that could be very, very significant as we get down the stretch.
Oh, big time.
Because I do think BC will lose a couple more games, but the fact that no matter what, they've got this tiebreaker if they tie Calgary, I think home field in that West semi is going to be very important, assuming, of course, that the Bombers lock it down despite last week's performance and finish in first, which I guess brings us to the first game of the week, and that is the Hamilton Tiger Cats going into Montreal as 2.5-point underdogs. Now, maybe it's just me because I watched every play of the Bomber Ticat game, but my jaw was on the floor for the majority of the first half. For all the things we've talked about Dane Evans with his inability to hold on to the football and the mistakes that they've made and the self-inflicted problems that have cost them games, He made up for all of it seemingly against the best defense for a long time in
one
the Canadian
chunk.
Football League. I mean, dude, this was just an absolute clinic. He threw for 5 touchdowns. They were going up and down the field for the majority of the football game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And all season long, I've been thinking that the Hamilton Tiger Cats are a better team than we've seen from their record. And frankly, they are. You can go back to a couple games where late turnovers by Evans completely flipped the game. And that's why they were going in with such a terrible record, but we're also, a big home favorite. Now, I had the Ticats to cover. The Bombers traditionally sometimes sort of sleep through some of these games out east, but they got absolutely blitzed. And listen, to me, this is the chance for Hamilton to really use this as a springboard going into Montreal to try to get on a bit of a roll, never mind just getting a win. And I don't know, call me a believer. Maybe I'll be found out that was fool's gold and it was just a terrible day for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But to me, that was the best performance of the season by the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And they're still in a very, very urgent situation.
Yes, they
considering where they are in the East right now. So, listen, I think that they continue to build off what we saw last Saturday at home against the Bombers. I like them plus 2.5, and I'll probably have a sprinkle on the money line as well. But for the point spread, give me the points on the road dogs.
It's funny you said sprinkle on the money line as well, because I think I'll probably be on that money line as well. If I'm going to go Ticats at plus 2.5, or I'm going to go Ticats all the way. And, to be honest with you, watching them do what they did last week against the Bombers really pissed me off, because I would think probably for about the first 8 weeks of the season, I sat here saying, you know what? I'm going to get on the Ticats. I think they're a better team than they look to be right now. And then finally, probably about a month ago, I said, that's it. That's it. Like, whatever it is, this ain't it for the Ticats this year. And then those buggers go out and not only cover, but beat the Winnipeg, not even beat, but hammer the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home. So I don't know, maybe that win over the Bombers, this is kind of what I'm believing. The win over the Bombers kind of has them believing in themselves again, because it would have been very normal for them to be doubting themselves for the first 14 weeks of the season, considering what they were able to accomplish and come up just short the last couple of years. So maybe this group just needed a win over the Bombers to say, hey, wait a second, we're still a pretty good football team. And if that's the case, going in against an Alouettes team that has been better lately than it was at the beginning of the year, has also beat the Bombers, actually. 2 teams that have beaten the Bombers going head-to-head this week. I never even thought about that till right now. I'm going to go with the Ticats, riding a little bit of momentum here, plus 2.5.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the fact that they won. It was the way that they won. It was what their offense was able to do in the first half. But maybe most impressively, and this is, I think, what gives me the most confidence that Hamilton can continue this going into Montreal, was what happened in the fourth quarter. I mean, the Bombers still put up quite a bit offensively and had got the game to 41-31.
Yes.
And you thought, oh, wow, here we go. This is just typical Bombers, just sleepwalk through a bit of the game and then storm back in the fourth quarter. And Dane Evans took the Ticats on like a 90 or 95-yard drive, taking up 7+ minutes on the clock, putting into the end zone, making it a 17-point game and icing it. So I think they did everything that a Ticat fan could have possibly wanted to see. Incredible resurgence of Dane Evans. And I wouldn't be surprised if this number actually comes down a little bit closer as people remember what happened last Saturday as they start looking at the CFL lines. But nice way to kick things off on Friday night in Montreal.
We are going to go to the Red Blacks and Argos, where the Red Blacks are a 1.5-point dog. I know on the graphic there I've got Red Blacks minus 1.5. It's Red Blacks plus 1.5, Argos minus 1.5. And I think this number might have actually just a few moments ago moved to 2. I think it might be sitting at 2 right now, but we locked it in at 1.5 last night, as we like to get our picks in the night before. The Huss, I'm on the favorite here. I love the fact that it's a short number. Give me the case for the Red Blacks here. What's they're 3-3 in their last 6, which isn't bad after the start that they had. I guess they have beaten the Argos once this year as well, so they've got that going for them. But why are you on them this week?
You know what? I mean, to me, this comes back to these East teams. I mean, we were at the Banjo Bowl. You were getting ready to call the game. I was in the Pinnacle Lounge sitting down watching Ottawa just about come back and win that football game. And I just think that Lapo's team has shown a lot over the course of the last month that they are a very tough out and very competitive with the rest of the teams in the East. And listen, they could have easily won that football game. They had it in the final dying minutes inside the 15-yard line and, just weren't able to punch it in for a touchdown. But I think that much like we've just talked about with Hamilton and doing it for one game, Ottawa has been far more competitive and far more consistent over the course of the last month. And the Toronto Argonauts have been good to me. I've been on the Argos in plenty of these East matchups, especially earlier on this season, and they did a pretty good job of establishing themselves as the number one team. But the way Ottawa came back in that last game, I mean, these teams are just so close. And the fact that Ottawa is back at home in this game, I think knowing with what happened in Hamilton last week that they absolutely need a win within the division. To me, this is sort of a toss-up game. I think it'll be close, but I'm going to take the home team, and if I can get a point or two, I'll be happy about it. I think Ottawa's much better than they've shown over the course of this season. They've been better lately, and the last game against Toronto could have gone either ways. I think it goes in Ottawa's favor when they're back at home in front of their home fans. Yeah, fair enough. You're right. That last game, they were certainly pushing. I remember I was watching that game in the booth trying to sort of follow along as much as I could in the fourth quarter. When we're sitting there going, and my stats guy was like, man, Ottawa might come back and win this football game right now. So, I mean, I guess I can see where you're coming from. I just think overall the Argos are a better football team. They've won 3 in a row. Their defense hasn't allowed more than 20 points, I think, in the last 3 games. Big game here for the Argos, too, as they look to wrap up the East and kind of lock things in. The Grey Cup coming out of the East will most certainly go through them, but they're on the verge of making it official here as well. So, the Argos are almost my Bizarro Ticats. I doubted them for a good first half of the season, have flipped recently, started to get on the Argos here a little bit, and I'm going to ride with them on the road against the Red Blacks, who I do give credit to Ottawa. I mean, they could have essentially just mailed it in. Huge shout out to Lapo, for finding Arbuckle and making it work there now and look like they're somewhat of a competitive team. They're obviously still in the mix for a playoff spot. This team could have mailed it in 6 weeks ago, and it would have been a disaster in Ottawa, but nobody else around the league would have cared. They put themselves back on the radar, so I will give them credit there. But I like the Argos, in my opinion, being such a better team and only having to give 1.5 here. So I'm going to go Toronto on that minus 1.5. And then that brings us to the third and final game of the weekend. I will be in Vancouver to call this game. Stampeders and Lions. They've played 2 nail biters so far. Huss, are you expecting another nail biter here, or do you like the Stamps to cover that number and win convincingly on the road? Well, I think it'd be naive to expect anything but a close game when you look at a 41-40 matchup the first time these two teams played, and then an OT thriller last week between these two clubs. I mean, I think they're pretty close. I think I know them well. One thing I can guarantee you is that there will be no love lost between these teams when they get out there. Now, of course, there was the sucker punching incident and the suspension after that, but this is a massive game. I mean, if BC wins this game at home, they, for all intents and purposes, just about clinch a home playoff game. I mean, they're at 9-3. Calgary's at 8-5.
They'd be 4 games up with the tiebreaker.
Yeah, all of Calgary's losses are 3 to Winnipeg, 2 to BC, and it would end up being at 8-6 with all of those losses to the teams ahead of them right now. Listen, BC with that win last week on the road really did what they needed to do in this series. They needed to split. They needed to confirm that they have that tiebreaker. And it was a great performance by the BC team all around. I just have to think that there's more from Calgary, especially on the offensive side of things from Jake Maier in this game. And I think they'll have a bit of a bad taste in their mouth the way things finished. And to be honest, now in their 6th try against BC or Winnipeg, I'd have to think that they're ready to actually come out of one of these games with a win. So, I mean, a 1.5 point number is essentially a pick 'em. I mean, we're basically going, who do you think is going to win this football game? And I don't know. I have to think that it's Calgary's time to win. They'll prevent, basically being locked in that 3rd spot for the better part of the rest of the season. And, as well as things went for Vernon Adams in game 1 for BC, it is still just game 1. There's going to be tape for Calgary. I think they'll be able to take advantage of that. And listen, I think we're going to have another really fun, thrilling, close game. I can pretty much guarantee a close game because you're calling it. And we'll take Calgary and at plus 1.5 to give us a little bit of suspense and some good storylines going down the stretch in the final third of the season in the Western Division.
I mean, before I break into my thoughts on it, let me just say this. This pick was based around there's no way Calgary can lose 3 games to the Lions and 3 games to the Bombers. You know what I mean? Like, that's just who in the world's the third best team in any league and has only lost to the teams above them and hasn't been beaten by any of the teams below them. Like, it's bizarre. So I think there's certainly, I mean, just on there's no way that'll happen. I mean, I'm going to ride with the Stamps on that now. Not having Judge is going to change things defensively, that's for sure. Vernon Adams impressed me. Not so much that I was like, wow, look at this guy. But he came in, took a little while, settled in, and looked like he started to kind of get the hang of that offense. Like, I mean, if you're Vernon Adams, you don't need to make the big plays. You need to get the ball to your receivers who make the big plays. Brian Burnham, Keon Hatcher, who's probably the most underrated receiver in the whole league. Dominique Rhymes, jump ball fiend. Like, I think Vernon Adams is kind of starting to realize that, wait a second, I got an amazing group of receivers. Yeah. This was just his first start. It settled in. So I liked what I saw there. I think Calgary, there's 2 things here from Calgary. They ran the ball great. They always do. Kadeem Carey is just an absolute monster. They should go on the road here and try to run the ball down the throats of that BC Lions defense. And then Jake Maier needs that game. Like, Jake Maier has come in and played well. I'm not denying it. He's played well. I think he was just over 301 yards last week. I think it was 301. And then the 3 games before that, he was like 270, 290, 250, touchdowns, not really throwing picks. But he hasn't had that one game where I watched him and I went, that's why Bo Levi Mitchell's on the sidelines. Because you just went out and threw for 350 yards and touchdowns on the road. You know, like, I know he's capable of that game, but he hasn't had that game yet. And if the Calgary Stampeders want any hope of having a home playoff date, they have to have this game. So this is a spotlight for Jake Maier. And if he is what Calgary believes he is, then go out and win this football game. Don't just – it's not even manage. It's beyond manage. Like, he's been much better than managing the game, but he hasn't had that game yet that's blown me away this year. I think the stage is set for him to do that here on the road down in Vancouver.
Well, I mean, you can say this about Jake Maier. We can actually include Bo Levi Mitchell, who's no longer the starter. And the one thing that those guys haven't done is beaten a good team this year. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple. They feasted on everybody else in the Canadian Football League. And as you pointed out, Dusty, they're 0-5 against BC and Winnipeg. I think as we've seen with the 2 games in Calgary, I'm not sure that, well, Calgary's home field is not much of an advantage. We'll see if it is for the British Columbia Lions. But I do think that we'll see a focused Calgary Stampeders go in and one way or the other get the win, and that will mean covering a 1.5-point spread. They're getting 1.5 points for the BC is the home favorite.
So there we go. 2 unanimous picks. Ticats plus 2.5. Stampeders plus 1.5. Both those teams on the road. I'm on the Argos on the road minus 1.5, and Huss is on Ottawa at plus 1.5. So we got our CFL picks in. Huss, you love your golf. You're back on it again. What do we got coming up here this week?
Well, as you well know, I attended the Ryder Cup last year. These team events have traditionally been some of my favorite events all year long to both watch, attend if possible, and certainly bet on. I will be the first to admit that the smoke for the President's Cup has been lost quite a bit on basically the top half of, or a good portion of the best part of the President's Cup team now resides on the Live Tour and will not be participating. I mean, the loss of guys like Leishman and Cam Smith particularly were devastating. And we're seeing basically the biggest spread ever. I mean, it's minus 25 for the USA to win the event at Coolbet. And that's like the best number you'll see anywhere if you want USA. I'm seeing minus 700 in a lot of spots. Now, the funny thing is, it was minus 300 a couple months ago as this was happening. And if you wanted to maybe take out a second mortgage or something, you could have made a pretty good investment, because I don't see how in the world this President's Cup team can really even keep it close against the United States. I would love to be wrong, but because of that, I'm certainly not betting a minus 625 favorite. And I don't know how big the number would have to get to bet on the international team to win this. So as far as the outright winner of the President's Cup, I'm not really sure there's any value in betting it. I will not be. However, we do have a couple of fun, we'll get the matches And, once we have the daily matches, we'll be able to bet on those individually, and we can kind of break those down if there's some games that we like to play. But we do have the top point scorer on both teams and the top combined point score for the event. So certainly I'll have a little action on that. Let's start with the international team. Sungjae Im is plus 475, and I think it's highly likely that he plays in every match for the international team, is the best player out there. Hideki also on the also on the club, plus 550. But if you recall, Hideki's been dealing with some injuries as of late, and I'm not sure that he's in shape to maybe go out there each and every matchup. So to me, that takes Hideki down a bit of a notch. And then our guy Corey Connors is at 7-1. Adam Scott, a veteran of this event, at plus 750. But listen, if the President's Cup international team is going to get some points, they're going to need to lean on some of the newcomers. And I'm going back to my guy, Tom Kim, who won for us during the epic fourth straight run a little while ago. He's one of the most exciting and talented young players to get on the PGA Tour in a long time. He's won on tour. He's got a ton of confidence, and he's surrounded by not only some of the best players on tour, but a group of Asian players, including the likes of Sungjae and Hideki and Lee, KJ Lee, that I think in a lot of ways are sort of the idols of him. I think he's going to feel not like this is a diminished event at all. Like this is one of the greatest opportunities he's had in his life to, again, show people that he is going to be a top player on this PGA Tour. So looking at this list, I think he's young. I think he'll play a ton. We're going to put a little sprinkle on Tom Kim at plus 750 to be the top international point scorer. And then you look at this powerhouse American team, and it's not surprising that Cantlay and Schauffele are at the top of the board there, plus 550 for each of them on the American points. Now, there's an extra set of matches in the President's Cup. There's 5 sessions, and it finishes up with everybody playing in singles. No one would be surprised if we saw Cantlay and Schauffele playing together as partners in every event. I think that's sort of what's expected, and that's why they're at the top of the list. But I'm going to go one more down to Scotty Scheffler. And I'm looking at this. Scheffler's 6-1, and then you got Justin Thomas at 750. I thought about him. Burns and Morikawa at 9. Our guy Tony Finau at 10. Jordan Spieth, Max Homa. Homa, by the way, what a chip in to win the Fortinet defend it last week at Napa. But I'm going to go to Scotty Scheffler. He's the player of the year. He was absolute nails a year ago at the Ryder Cup, which sort of was the harbinger for what was to come, which was one of the great seasons in PGA Tour history and a Masters green jacket. And I know this is technically the new year, I think, but when I looked at this board, I'm like, this is just another opportunity to bet Scotty Scheffler in the year that he was the player of the year. So it's 6-1 to be the top American point scorer. I'm on that. I think it's highly likely, and it's no surprise when you look at the top combined point scorers, that all of the favorites are on the United States team, because I think that's where everyone thinks the points are going to be coming. You can also get Scheffler at plus 750. And to be honest, if you're only going to make one of those wagers, I think you were looking at an American to be the top point scorer on the American team, you're probably better off getting plus 750 on Scheffler as the top overall point scorer than plus 600, because the chances of an international being the top scorer in the tournament, I think, is incredibly remote. So there you have it. The matchups, I believe tomorrow's matchups will be determined a little later on today. So you can check CoolBet for the pairings. And this is way better than the Ryder Cup. Like in the Ryder Cup, they sort of just submit their lineups without knowing who they're playing. They go, these are the guys that are going out first. This is the guy that's going out second, and that sort of thing. Whereas in the President's Cup, it's like a draft. You put out a guy, then all right, we're going to have these good dudes play them. Then our next one. So again, it's really, really too bad with what's happened to this event, how it's been overshadowed by the defections to live. But there's still some great talent on it. It'll be fun to watch. And 2 years from now, my friend, I hope that you and I are doing the Lock Shop in beautiful Montreal, getting ready for Canada to host this event. A good friend of mine from Winnipeg is the tournament director. He was the working for the PGA Tour. He's now moved on to be the guy for the Players Cup. Shout out Ryan Hart. So we'll start looking ahead to that in a couple years, because as I said, the Ryder Cup experience was so amazing. But as a Canadian, you're not really in on the States or the Euro team. It'll be very different when Canada hosts it at Royal Montreal in a couple years. So enjoy the President's Cup, and hopefully we can keep getting some winners in the Canadian Football League with the Bombers on the bye.
Yeah, and quickly before we wrap up here at the Lock Shop today, and we'll get to a full episode of this probably sometime over the next few weeks with us banging out 5 or 6 episodes a week. It's certainly something that we can fit in on one of our episodes, Huss. But NHL futures now available, a good chunk of them over at Cool Bets, including, for our 2 markets, a bunch on the Oilers, a bunch on the Jets as well. And the best part is that our relationship with Cool Bet is so awesome that if Winnipeg wants a few props on the Jets guys that aren't up there, you can get them. I know I'm going to end up getting a handful of things up for the Oilers as well. So if you're watching in either of those 2 markets, be ready, because we're going to have a lot coming your way.
Yeah, and hit us up on Twitter at Hustlerama, at Nielsen TSN 1260. Is that there's something that's not there?
Yeah, let us know what you want.
We know a guy, so we'll get it done. And actually, I'm looking forward to talking about this. I haven't seen it yet. I've had a real busy morning, and same with yesterday, but we were going through, when we were doing the Cool Bet lines on Winnipeg Sports Talk, some of the Jet numbers that were up there. We noticed that there was no Nikolai Ehlers, so hit up Patty and Jake, and we've got Ehlers numbers and Cole Perfetti to talk about today. So we'll hit that on Winnipeg Sports Talk coming up at the top of the hour on YouTube. If you haven't checked it before, check us out, Winnipeg Sports Talk in YouTube. Hit the sub, and we're there Monday to Friday, 1 o'clock Central, usually right after the Lock Shop.
We will be back tomorrow on the Lock Shop. Thursday night football preview. It's the Steelers and the Browns, a classic Cleveland-Pittsburgh battle. We look forward to setting that one up with you. Huss, I'll talk to you then, buddy.
Thanks, Dusty.